The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government and what we were tasked to do.
In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, we have a right to life, we have a right to defend life.
This legislation is centered on meeting the needs of Idaho families.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
The courts have long held that our ability to transfer title on real property benefits society as a whole.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
I feel like we're back to an unappointed board that gets to decide who is essential and who is non-essential.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
And for me, it's about a couple things. It's about food security, it's about national security, and it's about preserving American exceptionalism.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
Some of the impact there. Does a homeschool parent just say, I'm homeschooling my child, no requirements beyond that? And what if they homeschool them for, 2 or 3 weeks, take the tax credit and dump them into the public school system? And then what are the outcomes for kids that have been in the homeschool system as far as being functional adults?
First, excuse me, I want to thank Think Liberty Idaho for capturing that clip and sharing it around. That is extraordinary. That is an extraordinary statement. When I had to watch it a few times because I wanted to make sure that I understood clearly what she was saying and what she was implying. And I am flabbergasted that a sitting representative, that's Stephanie Mickelson, that a sitting representative would disparage Idaho citizens and specifically homeschoolers and homeschooling families by implying that they would commit fraud, because that's what that is when you take a tax credit for one reason and then turn around and then violate that reason by doing the opposite thing and keeping the tax credit. And then B, which is what I really want to talk to some of these homeschoolers that are coming up, is to imply that homeschoolers may not come out as functional adults because they didn't go through the public school system, which I mean, should we have that debate on who's more functional in society or respectful or whatever? Samantha Stigleder is from Post Falls. She is recently elected to the city council of Post Falls. So welcome, councilman. But more importantly, you are a mom, you homeschool, and I know in your professional life, you're also a nurse. So there is a lot of bona fides here for you, and I welcome to the program. First, can I get your reaction on what Stephanie Mickelson said there?
Sure. When I looked at it the first time, my reaction was definitely that of, like, I almost lost my breath, I guess, a little bit. I was chuckling and then just astonished, quite frankly. The first question is just kind of silly. I mean, I guess you could be nervous that homeschoolers are going to commit tax fraud, but seems unreasonable to me. But some people don't eat raw cookie dough. because they're afraid of things too. So, you're allowed to live your life however you want. But that second part is kind of mean. I was talking to my husband about it, and I was like, is this an audition for that new Mean Girls movie? To ask if someone is a functional adult based on how their parents raised them in a free country it's astonishing, and it's kind of mean. So.
Yeah. And and you don't have to get too personal, but where are you in your homeschooling career?
Oh, in nursing land, we would call it a novice, I think. I have 3 very lovely and sometimes weird boys. My eldest is only 10 and my youngest is 6. So we've been homeschooling for a little over 5 years. But I've had the distinct pleasure of meeting and getting to know and be mentored by a number of families around here who have taken their kids all the way into adulthood and are grandparents and have done this with 5 or 7 or 10 children. So I'm new to the game too, still.
And when in your experience with meeting with other homeschooling families, I'm certain at this point, because homeschooling has just exponentially grown over the years, that you've met parents who were homeschooled as well.
Oh, absolutely.
How functional are they?
Very functional, and some of my favorite people to talk to and get book recommendations from and talk to about what's happening in our local government and religion. And honestly, they're more well-read and more reasonable than many of the general public that I meet in my profession.
Yeah. So can you give us a little bit of insight on what, because we live in a community that has a lot of good public schools, has a lot of good private schools. There's a lot of alternative type forms of education as well as homeschooling. When you see your kids or your family interact with your community who uses all sorts of different types of education, and I'm not necessarily asking you to compare apples to apples and everything, but what is the general sense? What is the general feeling as to, this comparison between the expectation that if you go to public school, that's the gold standard, and anything else is just kind of weird?
I went to public school and it was fine. And there was definitely a stigma. I remember when I was younger that homeschoolers were weird, right? And that's, I don't know, maybe it was just the 90s and that's how it was. But at least in North Idaho, homeschooling is normal. Nobody thinks that of homeschoolers here. And you get freedom. You get to choose what is best for your children. And like I said, I'm new to the homeschooling game. I can't speak for the entire community. I think Miss Mickelson makes a statement about the homeschooling system. And I would just really like to say that's not a thing. There is no homeschooling system. That's the beauty of it. You can homeschool your children for a million reasons. You can homeschool all of your children, each for different reasons, and homeschool them in a different way. And that's really the beauty of it. You can do what's best for your child. And for some people, the public school system is what's best for their family and what's best for their children. And I know personally and love many families and many adults and kids that have committed their careers to being in public school, that have put their children in public school with fantastic outcomes. So it's not to disparage public school either. But when you hear a comment like, are they functional adults? It tells me that you have a bias against how I've chosen to raise my family. And that's not something that I'll ever stand for.
Yeah. Amen. Very good for you. That comment it's so loaded with this sort of,
animosity.
Yes. And a defense of a system that is quite frankly is failing. It literally is failing. I mean, I just heard we had someone on yesterday, Aaron Barnard, who was telling us that even in our local district in Coeur d'Alene, which is where I am, there were 600 fewer students enrolled. That's a huge number. And that just means that there's fewer dollars coming to the school, which means that the schools, rather than tightening up and figuring out different things, they're gonna lower standards, or they're gonna push people through, or they're gonna whatever they can to keep that dollar coming in. As a homeschool parent, when you look at the woes that public schools are going through, it must give you a sense of relief that you don't have to deal with that, and that you do have total control somewhat over what your kids are learning and what they're experiencing. how does you're a member of this community, you're also on the city council, so all these things are still affecting you. You're not necessarily living off the grid, so to speak.
No.
How does all this affect you?
I mean, I would love a $5,000 tax credit, but I think if you listen to other comments that have been made about these programs and voucher programs and other comments that Ms. Mickelson has made on other podcasts like the Idaho Main Street podcast last year, they can't pull the plug on public school. And I get it. I get that they can't do that. But like you're saying, they're not going to tighten up. And I think that there's this idea that when you start taking your kids out of the system, you're in some way, shape, or form disenfranchising the other children that choose to go to public school. And I think that that's just incorrect. What you're actually doing is helping them to become more efficient and do a better job by allowing the market to act. I don't pay for my groceries or like new clothes at Target and then also pay Walmart for clothes that I didn't buy so that Walmart can stay open for people that want to shop there, right? Like you have to allow the market to work. And then, sorry, I got a little digressed there, but as far as the tax credit goes, I would love it. But the truth of the matter is a lot of homeschool families just don't want the regulation that comes with those kinds of things. So, and Ms. Mickelson has commented on that about how there's no regulation in homeschool. And I think her quote was, there's a lot of waste and fraud in homeschooling arenas, which is just, it's just not true. Idaho already has a program available, so you can enroll in a distance learning program through the state, and they'll help you with curriculum. They'll help you pick curriculum, test your kids, make sure that they're on track, and they'll give you money back, $1,800 per kid, which isn't nothing. But you are responsible to the state for what you teach them. And a lot of homeschoolers could do that, but we've decided not to because we don't want the state at our kitchen tables telling me what I can and can't talk to my kids about. Yeah.
All right. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for joining us. What a great perspective. And I really appreciate, I really appreciate having you in my community, so to speak, because you're here. And I hope we can have you back on some other topics as well.
I would love it. It's always a pleasure.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, folks, we'll be right back. We have more to come. I thought this was really important, this traditional family resolution and project that you're working on. Why don't you share with us what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. So often as legislators, we're focusing on the things we're against. And I had a couple of people, Conrad Woodall and Kate Hartley, had this idea and brought it to me to have a traditional family values month in the state of Idaho. And what I love about it is it's shifting the conversation from what we're against to saying, look, this is what we're for. We want to uphold what's good and beautiful and true. And the traditional family has been the foundation of our society since the beginning of time. The resolution actually starts out by saying traditional families designed by God have been the foundation of society since creation. And what a wonderful thing to do to celebrate the family. I have a saying that our children are emulating what we celebrate, and we need to celebrate what's good. And so the idea of this resolution is to have a month where we celebrate the family, starting the Friday before Mother's Day and ending the Friday after Father's Day. And that's the website. And we have a petition on the website there. If the listeners would be willing, we'd love you to go on there to read the resolution and to sign the petition for the legislature to pass this resolution in the coming session.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Can we scroll down? I think we can see how each week is dedicated to a particular part of the family. And what you said was so true when it comes to when we wrap our kids up in a celebration. If we're celebrating certain things and we're not celebrating other things, they're not going to appreciate the things that we're not celebrating. Yeah. And so this is fantastic. So you got here week 1, celebration of motherhood. Week 2, celebration of sons, brothers, and uncles. Week 3, celebration of daughters, sisters, and aunts. 4 is grandparents, and then you end it with fatherhood and marriage between a man and a woman. So this is a shot across the bow to the folks who are, the cultural warriors who are trying to tear down the traditional family. And this is extremely positive. I see this as what you say, a way to involve children, involve our families in celebrating what is great. So how do you want to make sure across Idaho, that this is, codified some way?
Yeah, so the resolution would do that, and then the idea would be that each community would find their own way to celebrate it, and that we'd share ideas from one community to the next of how best to celebrate in each one of those weeks. I want to go back to what you mentioned was the attack on the family. In our society right now, there's a study in 2021 that said 17.8% of Americans live in a traditional nuclear family. So that attack that you're talking about has been very effective. And until we start fighting back, I am afraid those numbers are going to continue to get worse. What the idea of having a strong family, it's actually the solution to most of the things that the government tries to fix. Another part of the resolution says those who build stable families have a higher life expectancy, lower risks of mental illness, alcoholism, domestic violence. The children show lower infant mortality rates, lower risk of drug addiction, and lower incidences of engaging in criminal activities after puberty, higher academic achievement, lower incidence of mental illness, and fewer teenage unwanted pregnancies. And then it finishes with this, which is powerful. A stable family is the lowest cost option for both its members and the state.
Wow. The numbers back it up, and even we've seen it across all demographics. When there are two parents in the home, when there is a mother and a father, and that stability, that nuclear family, of how less dependent you are on the services of the state. And Right now, the services of the state, the services of our country are being overwhelmed, not just by the lack of traditional family structures, but also being the strain at the border with all these additional folks coming in is incredible. So this is fantastic. What any early reactions that you're getting by sending this around the Capitol?
Yeah, everyone I've talked to so far has been really excited about it. Obviously, there's people I haven't talked to that would oppose it, but I think the vast majority of the people in Idaho understand that families are the foundation of our society, that we need strong, healthy families to make Idaho continue to flourish. And so I think I'll be able to get enough people behind this to get it across the finish line. And I'm excited for we're going to have a launch in June of a celebration up in Coeur d'Alene that we've already started planning. We'll do a fun run to celebrate families and to get that out into our community. And I'm hoping to see that spread across Idaho and then across the United States.
Yeah, fantastic. So what we need people to do is to go to tradfam.org and sign that petition. Read the resolution that Senator Taves is presenting, and throw your name on this, and let's give him some firepower when he goes before his colleagues to try and get this passed. When a resolution happens, correct me if I'm wrong here, does it end up at the governor's desk, or is this just something that's straight out of the legislature? Does the governor have any say in this?
I don't believe the governor has any say in it at all. So I think that it's just a resolution that's passed by the Senate and the House, and then it would be something that obviously we think is important. We'd love for the governor to get behind it as well and say he supports it.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, let's hear it. Well, I know you're headed over to hear him speak, but let's hear from you where people can follow you, how they can get in touch with you. Where's the best place to go? If it's tradfam.org or wherever.
Yeah, for the resolution, tradfam.org is the best way to get involved in that movement. If you have other issues you want to talk with me about, benforidaho.com. It has access to my newsletter and to my position statements and more about me. So thank you very much for setting this up, Matt. It's such a pleasure, and I look forward to talking with you many more times throughout the session.
Yeah, we look forward to having you back, Senator. Thank you so much, and enjoy the speech today.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, take care.
All Idaho lawmakers swear an oath to support the Idaho and U.S. constitutions. But how's that working out for you? Because not all Idaho lawmakers share the same values. That's where the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge comes in. 10 statements inspired by those 2 founding documents that are designed to preserve our shared values. Values such as education freedom, safeguarding free speech, defending our protected right to self-defense, and being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. When a lawmaker signs the pledge, they are performing an act of political courage, accepting the challenge to be a champion for our values, and serving with political integrity. To find out if your lawmaker signed the pledge, visit idahopledge.com. Paid for by Citizens Alliance of Idaho. We ride together.
I'm glad we showed that right now because this is our show. That's our pledge, and I'm not ashamed to show it because we're trying to make the distinction here when legislators head to Boise. Do they work for the state or do they work for the people? And I'm on the side that legislators go to Boise, that they should be working for the people and they should be there to preserve our values. And that's one of the things, or that is the thing when we look at the pledge that Citizens Alliance puts out, that those are the values that we're looking for. But it seems to me that the folks that score high on the IACI scorecard have either denied talking to me about the pledge, or they've simply refused to sign the pledge, or they make up some sort of excuses about why they don't sign pledges, and that sort of thing. So I want to see the distinction between what is it that IACI is usually pushing that kind of just violates sort of our basic inherent values. Brian, you got any insights there?
Well, what I was thinking as we went to break before is that you go back, and like I said, the Republican position has been to support business. And so you get a lot of, I would say old guard Republican leaders who feel, okay, we should, we shouldn't be involved in business. But, and that's what Governor Little used as his rationale for vetoing the COVID Pause Act. It would have restricted companies from firing people for not, wearing masks or getting the experimental injection. And he vetoed it, saying that it's a Republican position to not, overregulate business, not tell them what they want to do. But the same governor has no problem giving them subsidies, giving them tax credits, giving them carve-outs, basically giving of the government to help the businesses. But, telling them that they can't fire employees for, getting those shots is too far. And you'll see that if I was trying to bring up the IACI scorecard during the break, they're having some issues with their website. It's once again not loading. But on the Wayback Machine, you can see last year's scores. They really only monitored about 8 or 9 bills out of the more than 500-600 that the legislature considered, and they used those bills to determine their IACI score. And the IACI score is pretty much the inverse of the IFF Freedom Index or the CPAC ratings. So whereas the freedom-oriented organizations will score legislators one way, IACI scores them almost entirely opposite, because their agenda appears to be to use government to benefit their businesses. Whereas, organizations like the American Conservative Union or Idaho Freedom Foundation will look for people who are, maintaining freedom and not using government to help this or that person or this or that business. So that, I wish I could get through here because to get some specifics, but obviously, the launch grant, I think, is the biggest and most obvious example of how this works. Representative Megan Blanksma, who was the House floor sponsor of this bill, although keep in mind the bill really came from the governor's office. He championed it in his State of the State address last year, and then had his friends in the legislature actually push it through. But she said the quiet part out loud during her committee testimony introducing the bill. She said that they want to give Doug Sayer all the welders he wants. Now, nothing personal against Doug Sayer. I'm sure his company, Premier Technology, does great work and employs some people. That's great. But it just makes it look like cronyism, as Ron Nate pointed out in his own testimony, when a company and a business owner give tens of thousands of dollars to the governor's PAC, and then the governor champions a bill that will then give that company essentially money. The idea is that students get to go get trained, or get trained in a trade that will then help them become productive workers. And okay, that's fine, but why can't companies pay to train their own workforces? Why are we asking the taxpayer to foot that bill? If you're one of these businesses, then you see it as a return on investment. You give a couple tens of $1,000s to the governor's PAC or to various candidates, then they vote for a bill that delivers taxpayer money to you to train workers that maybe 50 years ago the company would have paid to train themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, the entire aspect of, again, free enterprise is that you run a company, you have an idea and a project that hopefully you can find qualified people who have invested their own time and their own energy and their own resources to develop a particular craft. And the role of government when it comes to schooling, is this: we want people to have a basic understanding of reading, writing, and arithmetic and come out with some sort of intelligent success in order to, be productive members of society, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later with some homeschoolers. But I want to show the people right now, if we have it, this is that IACI scorecard. If you went to go look at the IACI scorecard now, it's been 404'd, as they say. And this is what you get and there's no reason to do this, right? Because they have, we've got screenshots of this. I mean, the internet is forever. It will always be around. So, Brian, what do you think is it just, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Is it that there are folks who run for office who think that these things really do benefit the common person, or are they just living in a bubble and they go to these and they what is it? You're down there.
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't necessarily think you have legislators and lobbyists sitting in back rooms twirling their fingers and thinking about how they're going to screw over average people. I really don't think that's the case. I think in the piece I wrote the other day that I mentioned, I quoted the president of General Motors, who was being considered for a cabinet position in the Eisenhower administration. He said, "What's good for General Motors is good for America," and vice versa. And I think people really think that what's good for Micron is good for Idaho. What's good for Albertsons is good for Idaho, and vice versa. And especially when you get into politics, you end up spending a lot of time with lobbyists, with business leaders, with the rich and powerful donors, which is to be expected. And I think it does become a bit of a bubble. Consider at the federal level. I've been noticing over the last few months, the last few years, that whereas Representative Fulcher, my representative, comes to a lot of events, and whatever you think about him, he's there, he's listening to people. His fellow congressman, Mike Simpson, I've never actually seen him at an event. He came out here for re-election, but he spends a lot of his time with the big donors and the big PACs and the big lobbyists. And you spend enough time with the same group of people, you're going to start to think that that's the world. That's what everybody thinks. So if all you're hearing is from business leaders, this is what we need, this is what's going to help us, this is how we're going to employ more people, this is how we're going to keep people here in Idaho rather than outsourcing, then you start to think, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think we just, I'm not saying that, businesses shouldn't have a say. I'm saying that right now they have a very outsized influence, and, we need to see the whole picture and hear from, regular folks. And we need to see what the actual impact of these policies that they're pushing are. Is the launch grant really going to help us keep business and industry in Idaho? Or is it just going to be a kickback to these companies that, were very generous with their donations?
Right. Well said. Real quick, everybody, the Wayback Machine, we got it here. Here's what they took down. We don't have time to go through all these scores here, but I just want everybody to know the internet is forever. The Wayback Machine is your friend. And if you want to go take a look for that, you should do it. And I know, Brian, you probably have links to all this stuff on your social media and your website and stuff. Please tell us how people can get to you and get your stuff.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at GemStateBrian. I would be Brian Ullman, but in the pre-Elon days, a lot of people got banned. Also go to gemstatechronicle.com. That's my new platform. I'm tracking a lot of the stuff that's going on in the legislature now. And subscribe at gemstate.substack.com.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Brian. We'll have you back soon.
Thanks, Matt.
I'm super pleased to welcome to the program this morning Representative Dale Hawkins. Dale is out of Legislative District 2, which is one of the larger districts. It goes all the way up, into parts of Kootenai County, down into, I guess he'll tell me which is the most further south, South County. But Representative Hawkins, welcome to the program. Give us a little bit of a scope of where your district lies.
Well, thanks, Matt, for having me on. So we actually start in Bonner County, all the way up by Heather Scott's house, Representative Heather Scott, and then it goes all the way into Clearwater County. And if you drive from Bonner County positions all the way down there, it's about a 5-hour drive to get from one end to the other. So it encompasses 5 counties. So there's Clearwater, Benewah, Shoshone, 8 precincts in Kootenai County, and then the small portion of Bonner.
Fantastic. Okay, well, you came blazing into the State House last session, and you championed a bill that basically outlawed ranked choice voting in Idaho. And now we're seeing ranked choice voting and open primaries on this initiative that's being circulated across the state, trying to gather signatures so we can move into either a ranked choice voting or an open primary scenario. So before we get to the initiative, can you kind of explain what you all passed and what you championed last session?
So we did. We carried, and the party had sent out early on the desire that we needed to get ahead of this as we saw it coming into other states. So we actually brought the bill that, and if I'm recalling right, it's 179, that actually prohibited ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting from taking place in Idaho. Now we've all learned that that's going to be superseded if this initiative process is successful, which will be a tragedy for Idaho.
So even though you passed a law, this would be an initiative that would be like supersede. So it would be constitutional. They're trying to put it into the Constitution.
Well, it wouldn't go to. Well, I mean, it would become code. It would become law. So right now, these things weren't constitutional amendments, but our initiative process, which I know a lot of people look at it differently. The truth is, the people of Idaho elect representatives to come down here and represent their voice, but most of all, protect their liberties and stop governmental overreach so we can keep being a free people. The initiative process acts as a direct democracy, and then that's where we see these millions and millions of dollars coming in from outside interests, true outside interests, trying to change the political landscape of Idaho.
Right. So then talk to us a little bit about this initiative. We know that there's a large group, in-state group that is using volunteers and paid signature gatherers to basically go across the state in different counties. I guess you can target different counties on where you gather signatures. But what seems to be the process right now?
Well, what they had is they had a signature threshold, and I don't recall the number. It might have been. I don't want to guess and get it wrong, but so they had to go to just a limited amount of areas, in counties. So we tried to change that as well last time when we weren't successful. So they can pick out just a few of the largest populated areas, pay people to gather signatures, reach their signature threshold, and then they'll give this to the Secretary of State. Those signatures will be certified, and this will wind up on the 2024 ballot. And at that time, we will have the chance to inform the Idaho people how bad this will be for Idaho. I mean, essentially, you do this, it eliminates, as a Republican, eliminates my ability to align myself with a party and just makes this open jungle primary that I don't think people understand what's really going to happen. And not only does it do that, it changes the aspect of the November election. So where we're guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution a Republican form of government, this comes in and actually alters that, because, you know, it's one man, one vote, one person, one vote. But this now, you'll go in and depending on the parameters, you'll go in and check your first choice, your second choice, your third choice, your fourth choice. And it's very convoluted, but they know the reason they're doing this is they know somebody like me or even you, Matt, you go into a voting booth and you see somebody that you know that stands for your principles, and you check that box, and these other folks are just, you're never going to check their box. Well, in an instant runoff system, what happens is that your vote will go through the first round. If nobody gets 51%, the machine automatically shuffles all that votes. It drops off the lowest voter, and then it does it again. But your ballot is now spoiled and cast aside. So it keeps reducing, because nobody like you or I are going to check the box. If Kamala Harris was running in Idaho, we're not checking the box. It's just that simple.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I would never say that she would be my last choice. She's no choice. I would never put. Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, talk about disenfranchisement, where you say, well, you didn't vote for the plural, you know, the 50 plus one person, so your vote is cast aside. That is un-American, and I'm really glad that you know, I said this yesterday. Idaho is at the we get to pay attention to what's going on across the country, and when we see it, we are very good. You guys are very good at saying, that's not going to come here. And then you get ahead of the game and start writing legislation to stop that stuff. Of course, you get pushback all the time. It says, well, that's not happening here. You're putting the cart before the horse. You're solving you're offering a solution with no problem, because that doesn't happen in Idaho. But those are snake oil salesmen to me, words.
Very interesting, Matt. Usually that is the term you hear. But when this came forward, there was very little pushback, and that normal, well, why are you doing this? Do you see anything? Comes up. This time it was silence. Now in the House, it passed pretty much down party lines. I think that there was maybe 2 people on our side of the aisle that voted against it. In the Senate, it went right down party lines. But I found out since the silence was because there were many who knew that in 2022, the groundwork for this was already being laid. They already knew it was coming. This wasn't in response to anything that we were doing or anything that was going on. This was something that they were bringing to Idaho, no matter who was in the legislature, because they want control. They don't want the Republican Party to have a closed primary, because they want to come in and thin out the people that are conservative and replace us all with Marxist moderates.
Yeah, I can't follow that up. I'm just going to let those remarks hang there for for a bit. I know you're busy down there. Would you mind be able to stay over one more segment?
I can do that.
Okay, great. So we will we'll hit the break here, and we'll be right back with Representative Dale Hawkins. We are back with Representative Dale Hawkins. Dale, when it comes to, one last thing on the initiative, if it does pass and if it gets on the ballot and if the voters vote for it, is there any recourse that the legislature can take once an initiative does pass?
Yeah, we could put forth legislation to overturn it. I know that this has been done before in Idaho. I don't remember what year it was, but an initiative came forward. The people said they wanted term limits, which I don't think that I would disagree with. And but the legislature did overturn that. So we do have the ability to do that. So even if it makes it through, we know that they're going to get the signatures. If it makes it all the way through and it winds up on the ballot, we can have one last attempt to stop it in the legislature. The difficulty in that, Matt, is it'll happen after the next election. So it is so important that people get out and vote, find out who's in their area that's running, that holds to these principles of a Republican form of government and the protection of our liberties and our freedoms. Because if we lose people, well, Idaho's just going to follow the way of the rest of the coastal places. So
Yeah, I mean that's the big concern of a lot of folks, and there's a lot of, I mean, Idaho has seen a huge influx of people that have come from those types of places, you know, even prior to COVID, but COVID and the pandemic really sent a lot of people flocking to greener pastures and freer pastures, and so we definitely need to preserve that. Can you explain to me how important it is that a private political party like the Democrat Party or the Republican Party or any number of these other constitutional, libertarian, green, how important it is for them to have their own nominee be selected among the group of people that associate with that particular party, that ideology? I mean, you know, the people out there screaming that they want to, you're disenfranchising them because they're not allowed to vote in the Republican Party when they don't believe in the platform. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so, and you use the right word, associate. So we have a right of association. There was a time in Idaho where there were no closed primaries, and the party, the Republican Party itself, fought for that and won at the Supreme Court level of the Idaho Supreme Court. So this is so essential, this right of association. This is our ability to gather as a private organization, as all organizations are. The Democrat Party is a private organization. The Libertarians are, the Constitutional. They're all private organizations that gather once a year and put forth the candidate they have chosen. Now, these other organizations, if they choose to have an open primary, that's their business. But the Idaho Republican Party has chose to have a closed primary because we're a closed organization. And the violation of this is, well, it's sort of like, you know, the Rams calling the shots for the board of directors for the Raiders. I mean, in those terms, everyone would say, well, that's ridiculous. The opposing team, if they make the decisions, that makes the opposing team win automatically. Well, that's what they're fighting for. They're fighting to come into our party and make our decisions for us.
That's what it sounds like. Great. Well, Representative Hawkins, let's shift gears. What are some of the bills that you're working on? What can you preview for us in your ventures there? Because I want to make sure that people understand what you're working on, how we can support you, and get behind your efforts.
So I'm not one of the legislators down here that carry an armful of bills. I'm looking for stuff that we can undo or stop, but that doesn't mean that I don't have some. I do have a school choice bill that I'm going to try to get heard. It's a tax credit bill. There's another one in the system that isn't necessarily terrible, but it's just not as good. So I'm going to take mine to Rev and Tax. It's a tax credit version of a universal choice school bill, and it'd be opened up. It doesn't have caps. It has a good amount for every student, and it would be available to anyone who chooses to use it. You know, obviously these things aren't forced on anybody. And other than that, I have some other bills that deal with, well, some of this is delicate, so, you know, I'm not sure. But sometimes if we let the cat out of the bag too early, the opposition gets the word too quickly. But I will say, you know, there's some issues with teachers' unions that we're going to look at and see if we can't make some inroads there, because most people, even in education, think that maybe in Idaho, which is a right-to-work state, that these unions have crept into other areas that they might not have any place in, and the state might be aiding in those areas, and we can put an end to that.
Yeah. Well, I know you champion fiscal responsibility and all these, you know, great political buzzwords that are out there, but you're a principled guy, and as I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years, I've really enjoyed watching, you know, when you stand up in the House in the well there and deliver some comments. They're so on point. They're so precise. We use one of them. We use one of those clips in our opening montage. How is it, you know, walking around the Capitol? I mean, you're an imposing figure when you meet, you know, when you stand in front of yourself. What is the sense when you're, you know, what are the relationships like down there? How are you working in this second term or this second session?
You know, everybody, you know, keeps it pretty good. I mean, everybody's got a good business attitude. You know, we stay friendly and you try to work with everybody that you can. Obviously, there's just some folks that that you don't have anything in common, but that doesn't mean you don't be polite. On the cause of fiscal responsibility, as everyone else in the state who was paying attention saw Monday, we had to endure a speech that just said, I want to spend, and after I've spent, I want to spend some more. And so right now we're all scrambling, trying to figure out how we put some holes and stop that, because everybody I meet in Idaho is running out of money, and we're living in a system that seems to, every time they turn around, they want more. When you and I go over budget, we have to use money from something else or just don't get what we want. It seems here there's this thought that if you run out of money, you just take more from the people.
Yeah, that's the truth. Okay, Representative Hawkins, thank you for staying with us. How can people follow you? Where can they get in touch with you to support your efforts?
So, first of all and foremost, I'm ashamed that I haven't said it, that the Idaho State Freedom Caucus is my mainstay there. We put out a Substack jointly inside that put out many times a week. But I have a website that's DaleHawkinsForIdaho.com. My email is the same, DaleHawkinsForIdaho@gmail.com. You can look me up on the Capitol directory. It shows my cell phone. I think it even shows my home phone. People can reach out to me, ask questions whenever they want. I do better on the phone. If you text me, I might get it. And if you email me, I will get to it eventually. But feel free, anybody listening, they can reach out whenever they want and ask whatever they want, and I will try to answer best I can.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Dale, for being with us, and we hope to have you back.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Great. All right. We will be right back after this with Clean Book for Kids. We have Senator Scott Herndon, District 1. That's up in Bonner and Boundary County. Let's bring him up here if he's available. Hopefully he is. Senator went through a Supreme Court case. There he is. Went through a Supreme Court case on the Second Amendment. And because they lost that case, thankfully he's a senator, so he could do something directly about it and write some legislation to help right that wrong. So, Senator, first, welcome to the program, and I'd like to give us a little bit of background on the case, that Supreme Court case, and then what leads you to your new piece of legislation for this year.
Okay, you bet, Matt. Thanks for having me on the program. So the case started up in Sandpoint, which is near where I am. That's my local town, local city. And there is a public park called War Memorial Field owned by the city of Sandpoint. And every summer they have a special event there called the Festival at Sandpoint, which is actually very enjoyable, great for the community. Basically, there's a football field, bleachers, and a stadium, and the city issues a permit for a private organization to use the field, and they have bands come in. It's basically 2 weeks, and for 3 nights of the week or 4 nights of the week for these 2 weeks, they have concerts in the evenings. And so they charge money to get into the concert series, and in 2019, they started wanding people at the gate. So as you would come in with your ticket, they have their own security, again, private organization, using a public park of the city of Sandpoint, and they're wanding people and screening for firearms. So basically, this concert series has been going on for decades, and then they suddenly started enforcing a firearm ban. So we decided to test the legality of that ban, because generally speaking, in Idaho code, we have what are called firearm preemption laws, which say that cities and counties and other local governments cannot regulate the carry of firearms. We're a true constitutional carry state. There's very few places that you cannot go with your firearm. And the preemption law basically says that the Idaho State Legislature controls the laws over where you can and cannot carry, and no local government can override the state legislature and their control of the laws. So it was our opinion that being a public park, owned by a municipality, a city, we did not want to allow them through a special event to prohibit carry of a firearm in this public park. That was our position. That's what we sued over. So we challenged this arrangement between this private organization called the Festival of Sandpoint and the city of Sandpoint, which is obviously a municipal corporation, a local government. We challenged the arrangement where they have this event, and allowing the private organization to control the park, they allowed the private organization to prohibit firearms. And we took that all the way to the Supreme Court of the state of Idaho. And the Supreme Court of the state of Idaho, I think they fairly interpret Idaho law. I don't think they do much in the way of judicial activism. Even in the preemption section of our code, basically says that private property is private property. And the way the Supreme Court interpreted that is, even though the underlying ground is owned by the city, the Festival of Sandpoint, the private organization, is technically leasing that ground, even if it's just for a few days. And when they lease that ground, it takes on the characteristics of private property. And of course, we always allow people on their private property to dictate their own terms, and that is right. And so the Supreme Court's opinion is that statute is clear as it is, that the minute they lease it, even if it's a super short-term lease, even if the lessor doesn't get total control of the property, that for that event, it is private property. And so what we want to do is come up with a solution legislatively to address that scenario. Because what it did is opened up a Pandora's box of possibilities. And it's really that Pandora's box especially that we want to address. So, and I'll give you an example. In the city of Sandpoint, the farmers market also uses a private park, downtown Sandpoint, Farm Park. They don't charge people to enter. It looks like it's public property. People can walk through it. And we don't want a farmers market, which is a private organization, to suddenly say, hey, for the duration of our farmers market, at the boundaries of the farmers market, you cannot carry your firearm. And so there's a whole list of possibilities. Boise, they hold their farmers market on downtown city street on a sidewalk. And all of a sudden you could say, hey, this block of this city, this organization that's private, because they're technically leasing this public ground, we're going to allow them to, at the moment, under that Supreme Court interpretation, theoretically, they could say no firearms. So they could have a guy at the front, a sign at the front, and screen people for firearm carry.
Hey,
and
Scott,
we don't want that
real
to
quick,
happen. So we're going to try to thread the needle here and find a way to solve that problem while respecting private property rights, true private property rights. And that's the challenge this session. So that's what we're going to try to get done.
That was my question, was the ramifications for the rest of the constitutional law. I mean, this is kind of a canary in the coal mine kind of situation.
Well, interestingly enough, if we look at the rest of the Constitution, the First Amendment is a great example. There is a great case out of Portland, Oregon in the Ninth Circuit. So this is in federal court, where a group used part of a private park. It's called Gathright versus Portland, to have a wedding. And then they prohibited, there was a guy who came in and he was actually a gospel preacher. So he was handing out tracts and wanted to pass out information because it's a public park, but they're having this private event. And they prohibited him, and the police came and threatened him with a trespass citation. And he sued, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, no, that's his First Amendment right. That's a quintessential public forum, and that forum never loses its nature. So in constitutional law, apparently there's no question when it comes to the First Amendment, but then it's a totally different law when it comes to the Second Amendment. These two amendments, number one and number two, are treated totally differently by the courts. Right. And that is very interesting and amazing to me.
Yeah. No, you're right, and it shouldn't. They should be treated the same. I mean, this is the rule of law. It's the rule of law for our land, and it's survived 250 years or so far. So we got to keep it going. Scott, we've run out of time here. I want people to know I want the best way for people to follow you and to find you on social media.
Okay, so you'll find me on Twitter or X at Herndon4Idaho. And I will be very active there during the session. I'll be doing a lot of live video and video clips, and I'm daily posting. And you can sign up for my newsletter by going to my website, herndonforidaho.com. That's Herndon, F-O-R, Idaho.com. Right on that homepage, there's a sign-up link. So you'll just scroll down just below that pretty picture of my family and click sign up for my newsletter, and you're going to get my email updates directly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. I wish you the best down there, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds great, Matt. Thanks.